Hello, my name is Professor Hudson, and you're about to view a tutorial on monohybrid crosses with Punnett squares. This tutorial should be used along with the narrated PowerPoint lecture for Module 6, Part 2 on Mendelian genetics. After viewing this tutorial, you should be able to assign the appropriate genotype to each parent, list the possible gametes produced by each parent, draw a Punnett square, calculate the genotypic ratio, and calculate the phenotypic ratio. Before we begin your guided practice on using a Punnett square to complete a monohybrid cross, let's watch a short YouTube video that gives a quick overview of how Punnett squares are used in monohybrid crosses.
Punnett squares, helping us predict what our babies are going to look like. Punnett squares. Here's two people met, fell in love, and had a baby. Their baby inherited the trait of having dimples, just like its parents. Not having dimples is dominant over having dimples, which is recessive. Because of this, we know the genes in both parents were two lowercase d's. In this case, the baby inherited the recessive gene from each parent. The baby also had dimples. These two people met, fell in love, and they also had a baby. But their baby turned out to be a crazy blonde-haired kid. How could this be? Genetics helps us explain why. Brown hair is dominant to blonde hair. If we look at the genes of the father and the genes of the mother, we can use this to figure out if it's possible for the baby to be blonde. In this case, if the baby inherited two recessive genes, he could be blonde, and he could be their baby. Scientists use something called a Punnett square to figure out how often this can happen. Punnett squares predict the number of times your children will inherit certain traits. With the father on top and the mother on the side, we can fill in the Punnett square like this. Each square represents the set of genes that the baby could inherit. If we look at the four squares created by the Punnett square, we can see that out of 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, 1, 2, 3 of them will be brown hair. So these two parents reproduce. 75% of the time, they would have a baby with brown hair. But of the 1, 2, 3, 4 genes that the baby could inherit, only 1 out of the 4 would inherit blonde hair. So these two parents reproduce. 25% of the time, they would have a baby with blonde hair. So it's no mistake. Two brown-haired parents could have a baby with blonde hair. Meet these two people. They too fell in love, reproduced, and had a baby. Let's look at the trait of having freckles. Not having freckles as dominant character. We can use this to help figure out the mother's genes. We know she must have 2 recessive genes for freckles. If the baby will get freckles, it depends on the father's genes. In this case, our father has 2 dominant genes. We can use a Punnett square to predict what the baby will look like. If we fill in the Punnett square as follows, you will see the different gene combinations for our baby. Each square represents the combination that their baby could inherit. If we take a look at all possible combinations, 1, 2, 3, and 4, we see that out of the 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4 inherited the trait for not having freckles. This means 100% of the time these parents reproduce, our baby will not have freckles. Punnett squares, helping us to figure out what your crazy baby is going to look like.
Now that you've had a chance to view the YouTube video on Punnett squares and monohybrid crosses, let's try a practice problem. Create a Punnett square to answer this question. Do not advance to the next slide until you have made your best attempt at this question. In the question, it tells you that unattached earlobes is dominant and attached earlobes is recessive. In the cross of 2 heterozygotes, what are the chances of having a child with unattached earlobes? Is it A, 1 out of 2, B, 1 out of 4, or C, 3 out of 4? You may pause this tutorial until you have the opportunity to answer the question. Okay, now that you've had a chance to answer the question, let's look at the steps for solving this problem. Step 1, write down the genotypes of both parents. In the question, they told you that they were both heterozygous, so that would be written as a capital T and a lowercase t for both parents. Step 2, write down the possible gametes that each parent can make. Since both are heterozygotes, each parent can produce either the dominant or recessive allele. After you have determined the genotype of each individual and the types of gametes they will produce for a given trait, draw your Punnett square. As a hint, when determining the number of boxes to draw, multiply the number of possible male gametes by the number of female gametes. In this example, 2 different possible male gametes exist times the 2 different possible female gametes that exist equals 4 possible combinations for the offspring. So 2 times 2 is 4, so you should have 4 boxes in your Punnett square. Typically with monohybrid crosses, regardless of the different number of gametes, most people will draw 4 boxes, as that's usually going to be the maximum combination that you would get in a monohybrid cross. Step 4. Place the male gametes on one side of the Punnett square and the female gametes on the other side. Do not mix the male and female gametes together on the same side. For step 5, fill in each box of the Punnett square. To do this, you pretend to cross each female sex cell with a male sex cell. For example, if an egg with a dominant version of this allele is fertilized with a sperm that contains the recessive version, you would get a baby that was heterozygous for that trait. Complete each box in the Punnett square. Each box represents a possible genotype that could be created for the trait in question if these two people were to have children together. Step 6. Now, in order to answer the original question, you will need to determine the chances of having a child with unattached earlobes. This means you need to determine the phenotypic ratio. This is the number of times that you see the unattached earlobe phenotype in the Punnett square. In this example, homozygous dominant or heterozygous means the child will have unattached earlobes. This is seen 3 times out of 4 in the Punnett square. So the phenotypic ratio is 3 out of 4 or 75%. Sometimes you may be asked the genotypic ratio instead. In order to determine this ratio, you must count the number of times you obtain each possible combination of alleles. An example of this is also on this slide. This slide completes the tutorial on monohybrid crosses. Congratulations on completing this tutorial. Now let's take a quiz on what you have learned. Create a Punnett square to answer this question before you advance to the next slide. If long fingers is dominant and short fingers is recessive, in the cross of a heterozygous with a homozygous recessive individual, what are the chances of a child with short fingers? Is it 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, or 3 out of 4? Okay, let's see what the correct answer is. If you found that the chance of a child with short fingers is 2 out of 4, you are correct. The correct answer is 2 out of 4 or 50%. This is the phenotypic ratio. Congratulations on completing this tutorial and quiz.